Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Welcome to the Small Business Resource Network's webinar series. Today's presentation is Annual Legal Requirements for Business Entities, presented by Lori Lee, the owner of the legal department. The Small Business Resource Network, or SBRN, is a network of professionals who provide services to the small business community. We are an affiliate of the Florida Small Business Development Center Network, the SBDC. My name is Allie Stevens, filling in for Nancy Boyle today. So I am not the director of SBRN. Our members are accountants, business attorneys, commercial lenders, commercial insurance agents, business consultants, and a variety of government and nonprofit organizations, along with select corporations who are vetted for their experience, and they serve the small business community, kind of the next level of service beyond what the SBDC can do. We welcome you to visit the website at www.sbrn.org. So before we begin today's presentation, a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please type them into the questions section of the control panel and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. We are recording this webinar today, so afterwards you will be receiving an email with a link to the recording along with a short survey to let us know how you thought it went. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Like I mentioned, our presenter today is Lori Lee, Esquire, the owner of the legal department, and also a longtime member and past president of the SBRN. So without any further ado, Lori, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Allie, and welcome everyone. I hope that you are prepared to talk legal technicalities because that's what this webinar is about. And I welcome the opportunity to share this information with small business owners because in my position as a small business attorney, I too often see small businesses get themselves into trouble with these requirements. And it's easy enough to fix, it's easy enough to do, and everybody should be doing them. I think what happens is most small business owners just don't know what to do. So that's what the webinar is today. As Allie said, I am a small business attorney. Our firm is the legal department for service professionals. The rest of the name is not on here. So our clients are service professionals who have their own businesses. All right, let me just see if I can. There it is. There's my phone number and email if you have any questions about today's content, or if you'd like to reach out to me for any reason. Okay. So getting started, annual legal requirements for business entities. You will want to take notes on this and you will want to write down some technical details. So this is what we're going to cover. We're going to make a list. You're going to make a list of what needs to be done on an annual basis. You're going to understand the importance of what we're doing today and why you're doing these tasks, these actions. You're going to learn how to do it. You're going to understand the consequences of what happens if you don't do it. You're going to do it today. I'm hoping, this is my wishful thinking. You're actually just going to go do these things now today. I'm hoping you're going to leave this webinar and today if you haven't already done them. And then next year when the same time comes around, you're going to know how to do it next year. So that is my goal for today, is to go through this list. So let's get started. Let's take a look at all of the legal infrastructure for a moment, just to say, understand what we're going to be talking about today, the scope of the legal requirements. So as you probably know, the law covers a lot of things for small businesses, a lot. We are not covering all of those today. What we're specifically going to focus on is one particular section. So this entire map here governs where the law comes in. So we've got government regulations up here, external relationships over here, that's with relationships with clients, customers, vendors. Internal relationships are down here with owners and workers, whether those are employees or independent contractors. You have intellectual property, whether that's copyrights, trademarks, maybe even patents. But up here is where we're going to really focus today. not on the regulatory compliance, which are all the rules that businesses have to follow. We're talking here in this entity structure place. This is where we're going to focus our attention today. What are the things that you have to do for your own business entity on a yearly basis? So let's start from the big picture right now. What is the whole reason for your business entity? And when I say entity, let me clarify that word for a minute. I am referring to a corporation or an LLC. So when I say business entity, that means both corporation and LLC. So what's the whole point of forming a business entity to begin with? And that is to protect yourself. You want to make sure that you are not personally liable for things that come up in the business. So what this looks like is the business is here. For those of you who know me, you know I love to draw. So of course I have to draw something, and the only way to do that on a presentation like this is to put my hand-drawn photographs in the presentation itself. So I always visualize a business entity as a box, and it's this box, and the business is inside the box. Over here is you. You're separate from the box. These are all the things that you have personally in your own name. So what we don't want to happen is we don't want the box to have holes in it so that the business liability problems comes through these holes and comes down to you personally. That's the personal liability we want to avoid. And I put the dollar signs here because not only is it time, money, headache, reputation, assets, it could also mean the payment of money. So that is the importance of having this business box to begin with. And we want this box to be really nice and solid and strong. We don't want it to have holes in it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you have this nice, strong, solid box that contains all of your business? And I often call this business entity, I often call it a container, because it should contain all of your business stuff. All of your stuff should go into the box. And then once it's in the box, then how do you maintain that box? And that's what we call the formalities. The law is, uses this word formalities, and really what it is they're technical actions that you must take on a yearly basis. Well, first of all, you should have taken some of them when you first started your business, and then some of them you take on a yearly basis, and that keeps that liability shield in place. This is my little knight in shining armor down here that protects you personally from those business issues that you don't want to come out of the box. So before I dig into formalities, there are going to be differences in corporations and LLCs. I will be covering both today. So if you have a corporation, you're covered. If you have an LLC, you'll be covered. But first, before we dig in, let's make sure we're all on the same page for terminology and structure. So for corporations, the owners are called shareholders. And if you have a corporation, I would like for you to take notes on this because we are going to be referencing these terms later on in the webinar. So shareholders, those are owners. There is a level within the corporation called board of directors. Normally, big corporations have these board of directors, and it's pretty fancy and formal. Small businesses don't really have fancy and formal. They have a very simplified level of board of directors. What you need to know is that they make higher level decisions. So, in your corporation, you might be the only board of director. You might be the only director on that board, and that's okay. Then you have a level of officers. Officers are the level that are the day-to-day. So they might be president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. It could be CEO, CIO, COO, CTO, CFO, whatever you want. Those are specified office holders. They're specified titles, and you have to be very careful with titles in the law. Versus made-up titles that some people have for their dogs, or they have for their kids, or they have for various people in their organization. There's a difference between kind of like a role that someone plays in the business that has a particular title, and an officer of the corporation. An officer of the corporation is significant. It is authority. It is the legal position within the corporation. So, you know, normally what I see for most small business owners is that the officers are very limited. Then, of course, the next you have employees, and employees might not be any of these. So you yourself, you possibly could be in all 4 of these levels. So you could sometimes wear the shareholder hat, you sometimes wear the director hat, you sometimes wear an officer hat, and then you most of the time wear an employee hat. So these are different hats that you wear at different times. You will take some hats off and put other hats on depending on what you are going to do. This sounds complicated, but it's really not. You have to understand the structure. Most of the time, you're going to be operating with 1 hat on, maybe 2. It's the occasional switching of hats that we're going to be talking about today, and you need to know when to do that. As far as documents go, the ongoing documents, bylaws are important. It is statutorily required that you have bylaws if you are a corporation. Normally, they can be huge, big, long bylaws, or they can be kind of condensed bylaws, which we write for our clients so that, you know, it's the rules of how things work. If you were to have meetings, if you take action without a meeting, those kinds of things. And then a shareholders agreement is not required. If you have multiple owners, multiple shareholders, we always recommend a shareholders agreement. This is what holds what some people refer to as the buy-sell provisions and things like that. Authority, ownership agreement is what that is. So that's the terminology for a corporation. Let's talk about the terminology for an LLC. The owners for an LLC are called members. Weird name, I know. You can also have managers. Managers, you don't have to have managers, but we'll talk about that in a second. Managers are kind of the equivalent of a board of directors. They can also be the equivalent of officers. So you can have officers in an LLC. If you don't, then the managers also have that role. And the title is manager. That's it. I know it seems weird. It feels like, oh, you know, I'm the manager of a 7-Eleven. No. In an LLC, a manager is one of the highest titles you can have. And then, of course, LLCs have employees, and the main document for an LLC is called an operating agreement. So that's the terminology and structure. Let's talk a little bit more about LLCs because I alluded to this in a minute. There's 2 types of LLCs, and you have to figure out what type you are so that you can understand what your annual actions should be. So the first type we have is called a member managed, which really means owner managed because members are owners. So member managed is owner managed. You also have a manager managed, which means that the owners don't manage it. You have a separate manager, which could be you, but it's a different hat. A manager manages that LLC. So the manager can be anyone. It could be an owner, it could be a non-owner, it could be anybody. So in a member managed, all the owners directly manage the business and the operations of the company. Every single owner has the right to do that. Now, this isn't appropriate in many situations because what happens is every owner has equal management authority. And that is kind of problematic when you have managers who are members, owners who are more involved than others. And so that, you know, typically is not what you see with LLCs, but sometimes people form them and not realizing that there's 2 different types. So, you know, they are appropriate in some circumstances. This is the title that you would see, the abbreviation that you would see on SunBiz. If you have a member managed company, you would have AMBR, which stands for authorized member. That authorized member is the person who is authorized to act on behalf of the LLC. A manager managed LLC is totally different. It's a manager or managers run the business and then they report to the owners. They report to the members. The members, the owners select the manager. And so if you have a manager managed LLC, this is what you would typically see on SunBiz. MGR, the manager, that is the person who is reported on SunBiz. So for people who don't like to have disclose who the owners are, Normally they would have a manager managed LLC and only the managers are disclosed. So these two types of LLCs, you either have one or the other. How do you tell? Well, you can tell by what you set up on Sunbiz, and you can tell by your operating agreement. So we just talked about the operating agreement is the main document for LLCs. So if you look into your operating agreement, it's going to say who the management is done by. If the management is done by the members, then you have a member managed. If it says the management is done by the manager, then you have a manager managed. And you're going to need to know that so that when you put together your list, we're going to go over which steps are supposed to be done by each type. Okay, now back to the formalities. We've got the terminology and the structure out of the way. What are the formalities? Well, the first and foremost is the EIN. The EIN for a company is the equivalent of a social security number. So in the eyes of the law, a company, an entity, is a separate person. It doesn't have a body. So, you know, it's a little bit different, but the EIN is basically the equivalent of a social security number. Articles of incorporation is the equivalent of a birth certificate. It creates the company. Articles of incorporation are used for a corporation. Articles of organization is what is called for an LLC. This is the birth certificate. Again, these are things that are done at the very beginning when you form your company. The annual report is also a formality, and you look at it as the equivalent of a government ID. You know, it's kind of like a driver's license or a passport or a government issued ID somehow. That is what you have for the annual report. It's the information that the government says this is accurate. And just like your responsibility to update your driver's license when you have an address change or things like that, you do have a responsibility to update your annual report for that information. We'll talk about more about that later. And of course, you have your business bank account versus your bank account for your personal. And then your annual minutes and consents. These are the things, the documents, the actions that are taken on behalf of the company. So this is one of the formalities that you have to do every year. So this you don't have to do every year because it's already done once. It is done when you form the company. This is done once. It is done when you form the company. This is done every year. So this is one of your annual requirements. This is also one of your annual requirements. And because you don't set up a bank account every year, but every year you do keep your finances separate. That's what this is, you know, there's no commingling. That's one of the formalities. Is the business dollars stay in the business bank account, personal dollars stay in the personal bank account, and you keep that commingling out of your business. You keep it separate. So that's an every year action, and then every year are your annual minutes or consents, and we're going to talk about that in detail. Okay, so actions are different. When you take action on behalf of your business, they must be documented. And there are two types that you have to do. I mentioned your annual report and your annual consents. These are where you document your actions. Let's talk about the annual report first. So most of you, if you've been in business for a while, you know that the state wants their money. And so this is kind of, it's not a tax, but it kind of functions as a tax information collecting mechanism. So it is due anywhere between January 1st and May 1st. And that is why I wanted to do this webinar before that deadline. So if you haven't done it ever, this is one of the things that you're going to need to do by May 1st. After May 1st, you will have to file a late fee. And then if you haven't filed by the third Friday in September, your business entity will be administratively dissolved. And where you do this is on www.sunbiz.org. So I'm going to dive into some of the technicalities of how to do this annual report and give you some tips. Now, I will tell you, I have seen so many annual reports that are filed incorrectly. And I've also seen where people just go in and pay the fee every year and they don't update the information. I've seen that people put information in their annual report and they have no idea what they're doing and it's completely wrong. And that incorrect information causes problems later. Obviously, you know, somebody like me, I'm a business attorney, I'm not going to be going on Sunbiz looking for all these, you know, random annual reports to see who's done it right. No, I see it when it comes across my desk and I need it for something and I look it up and it's wrong and now it's causing a problem. So that's when I see these types of information that is problematic. So let's talk about your annual fee. For corporations, it's $150. For LLCs, it's $138.75. I don't know why it's different. It's just different. The late fee, if you haven't paid by May 1st, is an additional $400. So what that means is if you haven't paid by May 1st, you actually pay $550. You pay that $150 for a corporation and then an extra $400. If you have an amendment, so for example, mid-year, if you have things that you need to update, for corporations, it's $61.25. For LLCs, it's $50. Now, the amendment process is a little tricky. You can kind of get away with doing some changes and updates without paying those fees. You might pay a less fee, you might pay no fee, depending on what it is. So that's just a little caveat there. All right, so I'm going to take you through the screenshots as if we were going through the website together, and I'm going to show you how this works. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to search records. You're not going to go to this annual report button. You're going to go to your search your records, and this screen's going to come up. You're going to choose by name. So if you want to be writing these steps down, you can. Number 1 is search records. Number 2 is name. You enter your name and this screen comes up. Of course, I'm using my own company here to show you what this looks like. And so my company's name is the Legal Department for Service Professionals. The PA is a type of corporation for professionals. So you go through here and you say, okay, here's my information. I see this is what was on there last time. What I'm really looking for here is the document number. You're going to want to write this down. This is the document number that will pull up your annual report filing. So you write this down. Once you write down that document number, you're going to go back to the main screen. And now you're going to choose the annual report. So you're going to click on this button and it's going to come up this screen. And it's going to tell you, that you've got until May 1st or if a $400 late fee is assessed. It's going to tell you if it's not filed by the 3rd Friday in September, you're going to be administratively dissolved. And email filing confirmation will be sent to your current email address on file, which we're going to talk about. So what you're really going to do is you're going to click here. Every year it's going to say click to file your annual report. Now, this is how it pulls up your annual report. You're going to put the document number that you just wrote down. You're going to put it here in this section. I will tell you that you might get an email, or you might have already gotten an email from the state. The state is random with it sending out emails. You cannot count on the state sending out an email every year to remind you, because I will tell you, sometimes I get emails and sometimes I don't. And it's not really the state's responsibility to send you an email reminder. So whether you get one or not, you're responsible for filing. So I would suggest that you go ahead and put it on your calendar and go through this process. All right, so I've put in my document number. This was my document number. I typed it in. And now it pulls up my information. This is kind of the inside non-public screen. So it says the Legal Department for Service Professionals. This is my filing fee because I'm a corporation. This was the date that I was formed. This is the date that the filing was. And then the EIN number. So if you are a first timer, your company was formed last year in 2020. And now this is the first time you're filing an annual report, you're going to have to put your EIN in here. So you're going to click right here, edit EIN. You're going to click on that and it's going to ask you to put your EIN. This is the EIN that you get from the IRS. This is the equivalent of your social security number for the company. It's called an EIN. It is the identifying number for your entity. You will put it in here. This is the same. This process is the same, whether you are a corporation or an LLC. I'm showing you corporation because I can show you my own personal corporation's information, and LLC is exactly the same. So you would have to put the EIN in here for an LLC as well. After you've put it in for the first time, you don't have to change it. If you've already got yours in, don't worry about it. Just click to the next screen, or scroll down actually, which looks like this. So this has the address information of the last time you entered it in. So you're just going to need to make sure that any changes that need to be made, go ahead and make them. It is your legal obligation, and you'll see that it is a third-degree felony if you don't update this information accurately. So you click on these buttons here if you need to update any of this. So your registered agent, I'll say a little plug here. Your registered agent is a very, very, very limited role. Its only role is to accept service of process in the event that you get sued or pre-suit notices. So the state of Florida has the right to govern business entities within its jurisdiction. The problem is not every business is located in Florida. So if you are not located in Florida, you have to have a registered agent that is located in Florida so that you can have service of process within the jurisdiction. So you have to have somebody within the state borders of Florida. If you're in the state borders of Florida, you be your own registered agent. You do not have to hire a separate company. You do not have to pay an annual fee every year. I know people who've gone online who have had these, business in a box kind of websites that form your entities for you, and they go ahead and automatically charge you to be your registered agent. You do not have to have them do that. That's a revenue generation for them. It is not a requirement. So I would suggest that you can be your own registered agent. And if you want to do that, you would update that here. As you scroll down further, this is where the officers, directors come into play. So you need to make any changes here. You would collect this button, push this button to either edit or delete officers. So for me, I am the only officer and the only director of my corporation. So you'll see the D here is for director. If I want to add somebody new, a new officer or a new director, I would click this button. Here are the abbreviations. So the D is director. I don't actually have to have a director on here. I can have a director or officer or both. And so I have P on here as president because that's my title. Notice I don't have anybody else as vice president, secretary, or treasurer. I don't have to have somebody on there. I don't even have to have those officers, and I don't actually. I just have me as the president. I also added CEO here to show you that if you don't use these types of titles and you use the C-suite titles, you can put those here as well. I would just recommend that you keep to the normal accepted titles. You don't want to start creating funky titles because the law is not going to know what those mean. You want to keep with the standard basic titles that the law recognizes because this comes with authority. So you want to make sure you stay within the safety zone of the titles. For LLCs, if I was an LLC, this is what you would see. You would see either AMBR, like I mentioned earlier, which means you are a member. Typically, you are member managed if you see AMBR. MGR is the abbreviation for manager. Now, other titles are allowed, but be careful. If you wanted to add officer levels, you can, because LLCs can have officers. What you would not see here is you would not see AMBR and MGR. You would not see members listed and managers listed. You normally see either or. So you see members listed if you are member managed, you see managers listed if you are manager managed. And then if you want to have somebody like, if you want to have a president or a CEO listed because that person might be out in the community signing contracts, opening bank accounts, those kinds of things, and you want to show that yes, they have the authority to do that, you can put them on as an officer as well. Okay, so once that's done, and if you don't have any updates that year, you're good. You don't have to click. But once you've done that, you come down here, it says, do you want a certificate of status? Yes or no. Certificate costs $8.75. This is not necessary. I always click no. You can get a certificate of status anytime you want. If you need it, you just go onto Sunbiz and pay for it then. So I say no. It's up to you. You move on to the next. This is the final review. So you do want to make sure it's accurate. So before you click, you make sure you run through it one more time and make sure it's accurate. Once you go to the next one, you're going to have to update your email address. This is the email address that the state will communicate with you. So you want to make sure if you've changed your address or if the state hasn't ever sent you an email and you never got it before, go ahead and put your address back in and make sure that this is the address that you want next year's notices sent to. That is important. And then this is, just to point out, it is a felony violation to submit false information. So when you're typing here, you are attesting to the fact that all the information is accurate. So don't just walk through it, click, 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 pay, and move on. If your information needs to be updated, you have an obligation to do that. Only if it's accurate, you move on to your payment section, you enter your credit card information, you get this final confirmation saying that your annual report has been filed. And that's it. Okay, so let's say you do that by May 1st, you're clear, you're done, you're good. If you wait and you do it after May 1st, you do the same process, but you just have to pay an additional $400. Now let's say you've waited and oh crap, you forgot to file last year and you are now administratively dissolved. What does that mean? It means your company is in the cemetery because the entity is now dead. So it is no longer active. It does not give you any protection. It has no authority. It has no existence. So what do you have to do? It's a little bit of a different process. You have to go in and pay all of your late fees for every year you didn't file. And then you have to apply for a reinstatement. If the state grants you your reinstatement, you've done everything you needed to, it will go back in time and reactivate you to the date that it was dissolved. So if it's important for you to kind of keep that consistency, then most people will do that. Sometimes I'll have companies that 4 or 5 years have gone by, they never knew they had to file an annual report. They've been dissolved for a really long period of time. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to administratively dissolve because the fees are so high and other factors come into play here. But sometimes it's beneficial just to start all over again. I would say most of the time it is not beneficial to start all over again, especially if you've got an ongoing business that is still active and functioning. It's best to go ahead and do your reinstatement, get yourself back into good standing, and get that liability shield back in place. So back to this initial screen. Actions are different. They must be documented. We just talked about the annual report, and I walked you through what needed to be done on that. Let's talk about annual consents. This is where people get the most confusion, I think. So annual consents are the next big thing you have to do every year. Again, I'm not going over commingling of funds, the bank account that needs to be done every year, because you need to do that on a daily basis. And that's an accounting function that you need to talk to your accountant and bookkeeper about, not your lawyer. You don't want your lawyer digging around in your dollars. You want your lawyer digging around in your documents. So that's what we're doing today. So these are documents that you will need to produce. And there's two ways to show your business actions. One is to use your titles. And this is really important for showing which hat you're wearing. So if you have no hat on your head, you are your own person. You are the little stick figure that I drew. You're not in the box. You're outside of the box. You're you. You're in your own name. You're in your own shoes. And it's just you. As soon as you start using titles, though, now you're in the box and you're the body that's acting on behalf of the business, because the business is invisible. It is a separate person in the eyes of the law, but it's invisible. It has no body. You are the body. You have to step into the box. You have to act on behalf of the business, but you do that with a title. You put the hat on your head and you start using your title. Normally, what happens is for corporations, you're using your officer title. So president, vice president, whatever your title is. That's the title you're using. You very rarely use the shareholder title, and you very rarely use the director title. It's the officer title, boots on the ground every day, officer title. So for LLCs, your boots on the ground title is either going to be manager or usually an officer. And those, I would recommend that you have those two. If you're member managed LLC and you have no other title, then you would use member, but that's really not typically seen. So you use your title. It's your name, comma, title. So it's name, comma, name, comma. Whenever you see your name, whenever you sign your name, it's comma, president, comma, manager, comma, vice president, every single time. And then the other way to show business actions is to do these written consents. Now, I will tell you, written consents are instead of annual minutes. So small businesses, you know, you kind of hear through the grapevine and you're reading online and people are like, oh my gosh, you have to have annual meetings. You know, you don't have to have annual meetings. You have to have annual consents. And so these written consents are what normally small businesses do. You know, big businesses have these big annual meetings of shareholders and directors, and they all get together and they do this big meeting. We don't do that. You know, small businesses, we're too busy. And plus, I'm not going to have a meeting with myself because that doesn't make sense. You know, I'm not going to send myself a notice. I'm not going to take a quorum count. I'm not going to take meeting minutes. You know, that just doesn't happen for small businesses. So we rely on a statute that says you can take any action that you would normally take at a meeting. You can take that action by writing it down on a written consent. And then you sign the written consent and voila, now you have meeting minutes or the equivalent of meeting minutes. So how do you do this? Well, first of all, we got to figure out what kind of business actions we are even, what would we normally talk about in a meeting? If we were to have a meeting, what would we talk about? And then that's the information that we would put in a written consent. So keeping in mind, we're talking about just the actions that happen inside the box. Okay, so what can those be? Well, if you sign contracts, the business signs contracts in its own name. You would never, ever, ever sign a contract in your name, your personal name, if it's a business contract. You sign it in your entity's name. So that's one thing that you would approve. Bank accounts, it has its own bank accounts. You would approve the opening of bank accounts, changing of banking accounts. Assets, it owns its own assets. So tangible assets would be like, I'm buying all kinds of new furniture, I'm buying equipment. It could be intangible. I'm filing for a trademark application. It could be I'm creating this, this course, and I'm going to license this course to people. That's an intangible asset. You would cover that. Whatever its own responsibilities are. Like, for example, I've had a loan, or I've entered into this huge contract to provide these things. You would put that in there. Liabilities, all of the, what are you liable for? What's the business on the hook for? What's it promised to do? Again, its own employees, its own workers. You are over here separate. You're not going to put your own personal things on this list, are you? Because you're outside of the box. So this is the way I look at it. If you're sitting at the table here, this is you. You're sitting at that table in your own chair, but the business also needs its own chair. Even though it's invisible, you have to treat it separately. So the business needs to be separate from you. And we don't always understand that separation. We don't always account for that separation for when I'm acting on behalf of myself versus I'm acting on behalf of my business. So here's the kicker. If you put those actions that you take on behalf of the business, if you put those actions on a list as your written consent, now we have documentation that is inside the box. If something goes wrong with those actions, those are inside the box, and that is protected. I'm protected from that. So it's a way to create that liability shield around the business and it says, here's what's inside, and then, I'm outside. So annual consents are a way to do that. Are they required? That's the first question I normally get. For corporations, yes. They are required for corporations. Corporations are required by statute to have annual meetings or annual consents. Because that has been such a long-standing rule, everyone in the business community and the legal community is used to this. LLCs are not technically required to have annual meetings, so they are not technically required to have annual consents. But if the whole business community is used to seeing them, and the legal community and judges are used to seeing them, and it is a way to document what's inside the box, then it just seems logical that it is a good business practice for LLCs to also do them, because it is something that helps you. It can never hurt you. So what I tell my LLC clients is, you will be doing annual consents because that is good business practice. That is the way to protect yourself. That's the way to keep the liability shield in place. Because if you're an LLC and you don't have these annual consents, something goes wrong and somebody's like, well, did you have annual meetings? Like, I really want to, come after you personally because you have more money or you have assets, and I want to see these annual meeting minutes, and you have none. It's kind of a false, well, I wasn't required to have them. Well, what else do you have to show that you treat the company separate from yourself? Well, I don't really have a whole lot, so it serves as evidence. It's a good way of keeping things straight. So I would absolutely 100% recommend that every LLC does these as well. There is no due date for them. They are not due. You can do them anytime you want to do them. I recommend that you do them when you file your annual report. So I'm a firm believer in efficiency, especially for small businesses. I don't have the time to, put my mind back in things, over and over again. So I batch my actions. So if I'm batching it, when I do my annual report, that's when I'm doing my annual consent. So if I do my annual report in January, guess what? My annual consent is dated January. If I do my annual report in April, guess what? My annual consent is dated April. So you don't have to have them the same time every year. I just do them when I do my annual report. I do the last 12 months or the last fiscal year, however you want to do that, and that's good to go. Then you sign them. That's it. You keep them in your record book. They don't get filed anywhere. This is not something that you give to the government. This is not something that you give to anybody. It's an internal document that you have. And I will say, sometimes it is possible to go back and fix a couple of missing years. But I've had situations where people can't go back and fix because the business owners that were there at the time are no longer there. Either they've passed away or they have left the business. And so then it becomes very difficult to go back and fix past years that didn't happen. So I would recommend that you do them in the moment every time you do your annual report, and it's easy to do. So again, major actions. Here's a list. I'd encourage you to write these down as a cheat sheet. If you have address changes, ownership changes, major contracts, major purchases, new loans, refinancing loans, anything financial, equipment purchases, bank changes, accounting changes. So these are the ones that I would recommend that you would list in enough detail that you can understand what they are. You don't have to write like a whole essay on each of them. You just kind of give enough detail that you can easily reference it, use dates and amounts. So if you want to take a screenshot of this or take a photograph of this, this is a good list to go by and use each year. So this is what goes in. Again, you are documenting the actions of each business entity to make sure that those actions count as inside the box. For corporations, you will also do two additional things. Number one, Your shareholders will elect the directors. Remember that structure I showed you at the very beginning. You have shareholders as owners, then you have board of directors, then you have officers, and then you have employees. Go back to that structure. Every year, the shareholders elect directors for the next year. If you're the same director, then you are elected again. The directors elect officers every year. That's how corporations work. So if every year, if you're president, you're going to appoint yourself as president again every year, year after year. You know, the officers, again, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, I would recommend that you stick with those or the C-suites and not get crazy on your officers. So these are two things that you will do every year for the annual consents. The shareholders have to do theirs. The directors have to do theirs. Well, guess what? You don't have to have two separate ones. You can have one joint consent, the shareholders sign, and the directors sign. So I'm a shareholder and I'm a director. And so what I do is I sign twice. I sign as a shareholder, I sign as a director. I might have shareholders who are not directors, or I might have directors that are not shareholders. You just have them all sign, and that covers it. So not only are you, if you're a corporation, not only are you doing your major actions that I just showed you on the previous slide, you're also doing these two things. If you are LLCs, the things that you will be doing every year, in addition to those major decisions that you've made, the members, if you will elect managers, if you are a manager-managed company. So the members will elect managers. The managers then can elect officers if you have officers. Remember, LLCs are not simple, they are sophisticated. LLCs are open, empty boxes that you have to kind of figure out how you want them to work. So that's why there's so many different options for LLCs. It becomes burdensome for small businesses, in my opinion, for them to be LLCs because there's too many options. It's too confusing. But if you do have a manager-managed LLC, this is how it would work. Again, you can do a joint consent. That should say managers sign and members sign. You can do the same there. If you are only a member-managed LLC, the only thing you would do, there's no managers for you to elect, so you would elect officers if you wanted to. Okay, so I'm hoping that's clear as mud right now. This is recorded, so you can go back. I do realize I'm covering a lot of information and I'm keeping my eye on the time so that we can cover all that we need to cover and still have time for questions. So screenshot or go back and review this one more time if you need to. The important thing to understand is your annual consents, that you do them. Everyone signs them and then you put them in your entity book. You should have a notebook that holds all of this information. So you would put them there. Okay, now I know that I've given you technical information, and if you want a template, I will share the template with you. Normally, it doesn't matter what form those annual consents need to be in. They could be on a napkin if you wanted it to be. The law does not say you have to do it in a particular way. So it doesn't have to be crazy formal. You can just type it up in a Word document if you want to and just put it all in there. You print it out, you all sign it, you hole punch it, you put it in your notebook, you're good to go. But if you want a template, I'm happy to share a template with you. If you want to email me, you can give me your name and tell me whether you have an LLC or a corporation. You will have to put in the subject line, you will have to put consent template request, because we get a lot of emails every day, and this has to be an easy process for us, of course. And so if you don't have in the subject line consent template request, we're not going to know what you want. And then you send it to admin@thelegaldepartment.law. Now, there are two types of templates. There's a template for corporations and a template for LLCs. You have to tell me which one you have, or I don't know what kind of template to send you. Once I send you the template, it will be in Word. and it will have blanks for you to fill in. Your company name, it'll have places for you to write your major decisions, and it will have places for you to elect the people that need to be elected each year. You're going to have to fill it out. So you're going to have to understand how this works. You're going to, you might want to go back and rewatch this webinar to understand what to put in what spots. It doesn't come with instructions. It's just a template. So you're going to have to understand what to put in those template blanks, but I'm happy to give you a template. Okay, so email us, subject line, and here's the email address if you want that template. Other reminders year after year, keep in mind that this is just for your business entity structure. Remember the map I showed you at the beginning. This is just for the entity structure to keep that box, the line around the box, nice and solid and strong. That's what we just talked about, your annual requirements. So there are other things you might want to need to do. And again, I would recommend that you tackle these at the same time. You might need to update your fictitious name registration. If you have a DBA, those do not last forever. They're 5 years, and then you have to reapply. If you have any licenses or permits that need to be renewed, this would be a good time of year to take a look at all of those. Every year you will have to pay your business tax receipt to the county or city that you do business. In the state of Florida, every county and every city has the right to tax the businesses within their jurisdiction. And so if your county or your city does do this, you would have to pay that tax every year. Trademarks and copyrights, this might be a good time to look if you have any trademarks registered or any copyrights that are registered. This might be a good time to take a peek at those. Again, those don't last forever. There are certain things you have to do, certain filings to update those in different time periods. You take a look at your lease. If you have a lease, I always recommend that you take a look again. If your lease is going to expire this year, perhaps you have to give 60, 90, 180-day notice if you want to renew or if you want to move out. So that is one of the things that we encourage you to look at. Take a look at your ownership agreements if you have any, and if you don't have any, do you need to put one in place or do you need to update one? Look at your insurance policies. Hopefully you have a good insurance agent that does this and reminds you that this might be a good time if you don't to take a look. And that is it. So that is the end of my presentation. Let me see if I can pull back to see if I have any questions. So Allie, do I have any questions in the chat to answer?
Excellent job.
Am I good on time? Look at that, I left us 5 minutes for Q&A.
Yeah, perfect. We did have a couple of questions. I'm trying to expand them. All right, we got quite a few questions. First one, my attorney advised me to be a manager for my LLC. Then I had to do an operating agreement saying I was a member. Should I correct this on the LLC filing? The business is just me and me.
Okay, good question. So it sounds like your accountant advised you well that you are the member and manager. So you are both. You wear both hats. So in your operating agreement, it probably says that the manager manages your LLC. It's okay that you're both. I'm everything in my corporation. It is okay that you're both. On Sunbiz, you would just have your name and your title as MGR, manager. You would not have you listed as a member. Even though you are a member, you would not be listed on Sunbiz as a member. You would just be listed as a manager, MGR. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Next, oh, hold on, this is a lengthy one. One more. My LLC has a St. John's primary address, and I had to correct that to my home in Duval. Do I have to wait until my LLC paperwork is updated to file my tax receipt in Duval?
That's a good question. So you had a business with a business address in St. John's, and then you moved the business address to Duval. you should go ahead and get your business tax receipt in Duval now. So technically, you need to do it when you move into Duval. Duval, just like St. John's, has they renew every year. I believe it's in April. So, you know, if you go ahead and file next month, then you will be on the same yearly renewal. If you file now, they may have you file a reduced fee because it's just right around the corner to renew.
Awesome, thank you. She followed it up with, right now my LLC has no references to Duval addresses on it, so I think they would turn me away, but I've been quote unquote open since mid-February, so concerned about being late filing with Duval for biz permits.
I see. So if you have not filed your annual report with the state of Florida, and that's what I just went through, your annual report with the state of Florida, where you go on SunBiz, that is the state. You need to go in and file your annual report and update your address on SunBiz. File your annual report so that it has accurate information on SunBiz. Then when you go into Duval County to do your business tax receipt, they'll look at SunBiz and they'll see the same information. They'll see the Duval address on SunBiz, and then they'll file you a Duval tax receipt. So you do need, and if you have already filed your annual report, you can go in and do an address update. There is a link on SunBiz that you can do an address update, and I believe it's at no charge still.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, next one. Like I said, we've got quite a few here. Well, not quite a few. We've got a handful more. Somebody asked, I hope there is an example document for the business actions. Would love to see what this would look like. I don't know if that's something you have, Lori, or...
I don't. I obviously I can't share clients' information, and I don't have a sample that it looks like. It would be different for every business. And again, I think the important part is that it doesn't have to be in fancy language. It doesn't have to be, like a contract's written. It doesn't have to do that. All I have to do is say, hey, I opened a bank account at Wells Fargo as of February 2021. That's good enough. And that list of major decisions that I did give you, that should help you trigger things like big contracts and things like that. If you think it would be discussed at an annual meeting, then I think that it goes into your consent.
Let's see, next question. Do you recommend keeping a running list during the year to file annually, or as a new business, should I get my contracts and courses? Oh, sorry, somebody just typed another one in, sorry. Or as a new business, should I get my contracts and course documents before my first annual report?
Can you read that question to me one more time?
Sorry, I got messed up. Do you recommend keeping a running list during the year to file annually, or as a new business, should I get my contracts and courses documented before my first annual report?
So I think there's a crossover there.
Okay.
The annual report has to be done every year. You have no choice. So if you've already filed, if you've already created a corporation, or an LLC, the annual report is required. You cannot wait on that. So you have to file that. The waiting on the course, that might be something you're talking about with the business tax receipt. And technically, you don't have to get the business tax receipt until you open for business. So that's a Duval County, a local thing, versus the annual report is a state thing. The state thing is, as soon as you form your LLC or your corporation, you have to start doing annual reports every year. I hope I answered that question. I think there was some confusion and crossover with those two requirements.
Awesome. Okay. Next question. Address. Oh, I think this is in reply to you answering her previous questions. Address change is in to SunBiz, just waiting for amendment to be approved. So have to wait for Sunbiz update, the updated sound. Yeah.
Yes, and then when you go in, you'll have that updated Sunbiz to show the business tax receipt.
Awesome. Next question. I don't know if this is the platform to be answering it, but or if we have time. But can you provide more detail about business tax receipts?
Okay, so the state of Florida passed a law that said that counties and cities can collect a business tax from businesses inside their jurisdiction. Some counties and cities don't do it. Some of them do. So for example, Baker County does not have one. So you can do business in Baker County and not pay a tax. Duval County does have one. So if your business is located in Duval County, then you have to pay that tax. How do you pay the tax? Well, if you go on to COJ, City of Jacksonville's website, and you find their link for business tax, or you go to the business tab and it'll say business tax receipts, it has this huge long website, whole page explaining the business tax receipt. Basically, in a nutshell, is you have to go in person for Duval only. You have to go in person the first time, and you have to take your business documents and your driver's license in, and you pay the tax, and you get this little printout, and the printout goes on your business wall. After that first time, every year when it's time to renew, they just mail it to you, and you can pay by mail or you can pay online, but you have to do it every year. St. Johns County has an all online process, so that's better. You don't have to go in person for the first time in St. John's.
Okay, thank you. Another question, what insurance do you recommend? That might be a broad question.
Whew. Insurance that covers your business activities.
Easy. Okay. Next question, and the last question. I'm a sole proprietor. I thought I would be able to get some clarification on opening my immigration service consultation business. Clear on the legal requirements of this service I will be providing in Gainesville. I know South Florida and Central Florida have these, but I'm having a hard time researching such businesses. I'm assuming for here in North Florida, if there's any differences?
I don't think I understand the question specifically, but I think I get the gist that someone's asking about their particular business model and whether or not that model and those particular services would be acceptable or legal. And I think that is something that you will have to talk to an attorney one-on-one about to see whether or not that is something that you can actually do as a business. So there's various resources. Obviously, the SBDC would be the first place I would start. Their consultants are very good at the SBDC and can help you kind of make that business plan. And then once you figure out exactly what you're offering, exactly what you're doing, and who you're doing it for, then if you take that to an attorney, they can then help you figure out what the legal requirements are. And remember on the infrastructure map I showed you, the top it said government regulations, and then the one we were talking about was entity structure. What you're talking about is the regulatory compliance, which was the other piece to that, which we did not cover in this seminar today. We covered the entity structure. But I believe that regulatory compliance is a case-by-case, business-specific answer. So you will need to consult with somebody individually.
Thank you, Lori. That was the last question. Lots of information. I hope everybody gained a nugget of knowledge throughout the course of this. Lots to take in, but again, Lori mentioned this is being recorded. If you would like to refer back to it, if you missed anything, it will be there in the recording link sent out this afternoon. Lori, thank you for a fabulous presentation as always. You're an extraordinary teacher. We thank you.
My pleasure.
And everybody have a great weekend, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye, Lori.
Bye, Allie. Thank you.